Hello, my friends. I hope you're having an amazing day. Hopefully you had an amazing weekend. We have a lot to get to this week. Of course, a ton of activity out there. But today we want to talk about how to survive an election because there's a lot of doom and gloom and I can sense sort of negativity out there. And I wanted to share a couple things that were bouncing around my head as we're still waiting for all of the dust to settle. I was thinking about a couple things that we talk a lot about on the show, but I thought it might be useful for us to go back and dig out some of these concepts. At least this is something that I was doing recently. The first thing that we talk a lot about that I think is very important is to remember that government is not life. These are two separate things. The government is kind of this disgusting layer that exists upon our lives. And oftentimes, I know I can, conflate the two. We can get so plugged in every single day talking about these issues that it can be hard to remember that government is not life. These are two separate structures that exist. And government was never going to save us, never has saved us, never will save us. Doesn't matter what politician is in charge or what plan is in place, government at best can really get out of the way and allow us to live our own lives. And so even though the current iteration of government is different, it's not exactly what many of us would like to see out there, it's still important to remember that this was not going to suddenly make all of our lives like we all won the lottery. You know, there's kind of a base layer. There's only so much the government can do to really adjust how things are in our lives. And I think about this in the concept, there's a concept called low-hanging fruit. You know, there's a lot of people who will sort of try to get to the top of the tree to achieve, you know, that get that fruit at the very top, when in reality, there's a lot that we can do in our lives that will really dramatically change how our lives are, right, for the better. So oftentimes we're fighting for that piece of fruit at the top of the tree. We want the government to come in here and do something, and that, you know, that's really at the top. That's going to change everything for us, whereas we can just kind of go around and pick the low-hanging fruit and our lives will be dramatically better. You know, we'll be able to eat easily without having to climb all the way up to the top of the tree. There's a much higher ROI from adjusting things in our lives, in our communities, from getting more anti-fragile, as we'll talk about next. But there's a lot of ways that we can really improve our lives without the government, right? The government can come in and maybe make some top layer policy changes, but are they going to help you lose 10 pounds? No, they're not. Are they going to help you make any more money? No. Are they really going to solve any industry problems? Really? No. Right? They kind of just regulate and move things around, and it's up to us, really, the people who actually make things work, who actually live, to really change the course of our lives and our families' lives and our friends' lives and our communities' lives. The government is just this big fiction that exists. And sometimes we, personally me, I can get a little bit too invested and conflate the two. Of course, it's very important, and I'm not saying that the people who are not running for office and working in these positions and donating and rallying and, you know, fighting for these issues are not consequential. They are. But I am saying that sometimes we can expect too much of the government or conflate too much of our lives with the government. And it's very important for me to just step back and remember that these are two separate things. And our lives can be much more meaningfully impacted positively if we accept these two concepts, that the government is not life and our lives can be great in spite of the government. Keep that division front and center. It's been useful for me. I mentioned Anti-fragility. This is an important concept in my life, something that we've talked about pretty regularly on the show from time to time when it pops up. One of my most favorite concepts, it's this idea that you can structure your life or your investments or your relationships or whatever in anti-fragile ways, where when there is disorder, when there is chaos, those things actually become stronger. So this comes from a guy named Nassim Nicholas Taleb, or Nicholas Nassim Taleb. He wrote a book called Anti-Fragile, part of a book series called Incerto, and it's actually on the bookshelf behind me when we do the show. And it's this idea that we have this concept in our minds called fragile, right? Fragility. Good example of this is a piece of valuable china, glass, 1,000 years old, whatever, very valuable. And that's a pretty fragile piece. If you have that piece sitting in a room and there's disorder, it's in a china shelf, very protected, very safe. But if there's disorder, there's an earthquake, or there's some sort of loud bump on the shelf, what's going to happen? That fragile piece is going to break. So we ask ourselves, well, what's the opposite of fragile? How do we don't want to be fragile, we don't want to be brittle and break at any sign of disorder, how do we become the opposite of that? And so you can play this game with yourself. What is the opposite of that china glass that might break? You'd say, well, it's probably something strong. It's not made out of glass. Maybe it's made out of steel. Maybe the inside of the shelf has padding on it. And so if there is an earthquake, if there is disorder, if there's a bump on the shelf, it doesn't break, right? It's very robust. It's actually stronger. So we're not fragile, we're strong. We're not going to break when the economy collapses because we're strong, we're robust, right? Many people thought that that was the opposite of fragile, robust. But what Nassim talks about, his argument, is that the opposite of something that's fragile, that breaks with disorder, is not something that is strong, that can withstand disorder. It's something that gains from disorder. It's something that becomes stronger. In this case, the china glass, if it experiences an earthquake, it's like, perfect. I'm stronger now. I love this. I love more earthquakes. Shake me again, baby. Hit it harder this time, because I'm going to become stronger. The disorder is going to increase the strength, the power. So when we see a situation like this, where the country is shifting, many people in the political class were prognosticating about a certain outcome. Obviously that didn't happen. And people are seeing maybe some permanent shifts in this world. I don't necessarily believe it's about abortion or MAGA candidates or any one particular issue, Gen Z or, democracy or any of these things. I think that a lot of what we're seeing in this country is now the consequence of COVID and sort of the ossification of people's political dispositions. Politics went from being political to now being life and death. It's now a situation where if you disagree with the mainstream narrative, you disagree with the science, you disagree with democracy, you might literally be causing insurrection and all of these things, right? So it's become so partisan and weaponized that these divisions are now calcified, and this may not be changeable. It may not be winnable. I know people are pointing to Florida and pointing to these other areas where there may be a reversal of fortune. But if you look at this stuff historically, if you look at the patterns over history, and you can go to any thesis that you'd like, you can take a look at, for example, The Fourth Turning, the book Generations, this idea that there are generational ebbs and flows that happen, and that we are sort of going through these in a cyclical pattern, whether we like it or not. Whether you talk about the book Pendulum, that we ebb and flow from generations of we, where people are focused on themselves, to generations of me, or we, me is focused on ourselves, we is focused on sort of society. You go from selfish states to communal states, and you ebb and flow. You could take a look at Ray Dalio, his economic thesis, the rise and fall of nation states and empires, and that the United States is coming down, right? And in spite of everything that we saw, in spite of economic oblivion, inflation through the roof, collapsing infrastructure at the border and elsewhere, we're told that, oh, it's about abortion. Oh, it's about MAGA candidates. Oh, it's about, all of these kind of issues that I think are just tangential, incidental to the bigger issues here, which are that the society has just become tribal, become ossified, calcified. These positions are not going to change. People just pick a political party and they're okay with the status quo as long as their political party wins. That's why we get candidates who can hardly formulate a cohesive thought in multiple races and multiple locations around the country. It's not good. It's sort of the first past the finish line, the first warm body with a breathing, beating chest cavity is good enough for us because it's just about the party winning. And when you have a situation like that, we have to ask ourselves about the solutions that are going to be installed to deal with some of the problems that currently exist. And I don't think that it is realistic to think that the US is going to gain in capacity to solve more problems for more people when they already can't solve the current problems for the current people. How are they going to do more? I don't think that they're going to be able to. And, it's a bummer, but I do think that this concept of anti-fragility provides opportunity for those who recognize that we are living in these patterns, we are living in these ebbs and flows. And so, a takeaway from anti-fragile is this idea that it's important to diversify your risks and your efforts. He calls it a barbell strategy. So you might have, for example, if you have an area in your life where you can have low risk, moderate upside, sort of a steady standard job, for example. That's one side of what he calls the barbell, nice and balanced, something safe like lifting a barbell, right, at a bench press or a squat rack. You have this set of activities that you do that are safe and secure, low risk, moderate upside, and you pair that with something on the other end of the barbell. It's a little higher risk, but dramatically more upside, because you want to be anti-fragile. You want to have the possibility of exponential growth in a high risk, high upside opportunity, but you don't want to be all in on that. You want to have that side of the equation balanced by something more traditional and something standard and steady. So you can think about this application in a number of different ways on how you can diversify. And this does bring anti-fragility, because if the world does have disorder, let's say the economy collapses, you're now not stuck, right? Now if you have a standard steady job that is terminated, now you actually get a little bit stronger because you can focus on that other side piece or whatever that is, right? This is a job example, but people do this with financial instruments, right? You plug a bunch of money into something very safe like a 401k, and you also go out there and you play around in some startups and some investment opportunities that might have tremendous upside. So once you understand this concept, and you start to ask yourself, this was for me, how can I become more anti-fragile, where things become disorderly, give me opportunities to solve more problems, to be a bigger solution, to provide more value in various ways. And in many ways, this entire YouTube channel, this entire show, our entire community, everything that we've built here was born out of this concept, because a lot of it came about after the national emergency was declared and we had our first lockdowns, right? And I was reading his book and his work at the time. Okay, how can we become more anti-fragile in the things that we do here in my life, at our law firm, for our team, for the people we serve, right? I don't want to be in a position where our law firm gets taken out because the government locks us down and we can't serve the people that we serve. At the R&R Law Group, shout out, free case evaluations, link down in the description below. But we are trying to survive an economic era that's very uncertain. And when you start to think about some fiscal responsibility and a little bit of a change, the elections happen and Joe Biden confirms for us that nothing's going to change. When he wins, he's asked, any course correction? Your approval's kind of in the toilet, economy's not looking good. You going to do anything about it? No, why should I? We're doing great. And that means for the rest of us that they're telling us what the trajectory is going to be. So if we already know what the trajectory is going to be, we've got a responsibility to become anti-fragile. And so I wanted to share some ideas with you on this. How do you build a barbell? Like we were talking about. Shout out to the Popo. Shout out to the Popo. How do you build a barbell that might be useful for building anti-fragility into your life? Well, when I was thinking about this, you take a look at polar opposites a bit. What is something that might exist in the old world that is safe, and something that exists in the new world for you that is a little bit riskier, but with a lot more upside? Can you balance those two into a barbell strategy? New world, old world. What about the world of atoms, the real world that we're all walking around in, trees, and the world of bits? Can you develop a barbell strategy? Something in the world of atoms, something in the world of bits, online, digital infrastructure. Can you develop something that's technical? Do you have a very technical skill set that you can utilize regularly, consistently, mechanically, that may have very standard upside? Right? You're not going to win $20 million at a tech job or get a big windfall. Maybe you will, or you could, right? Think about that at a startup or something. But we're talking about now maybe a creative opportunity as well. Taking your technical stuff, using that, churning through the technical skill set, but then dabbling in something creative that might give you exponential growth. Same types of opposites. Something very grounded, something very rooted versus something very spiritual, something that makes you think and explore, outside of your body. Same concept with practical versus outrageous, and you understand these opposites. But in our lives, where can we see these tensions or these opportunities, really, to create our own barbell strategies in a way that makes us anti-fragile, so that as this continual disorder unfolds in front of us, we have multiple strategies, and just like lifting barbells, we can become stronger. Really, the word is anti-fragile. Things that gain from the disorder. Where can we solve more problems? Where can we help more people? That's where the energy is. And if you can think about how to structure your life that way, it gives you a little bit more security, safety, and I think a bright, strong future. Now, the final thought is that right now we are quite zoomed in. If you think about it like the map app on your phone, which is one of the most frequent apps I use, you're zooming in and zooming out. Right now we are zoomed in on this battle for freedom here in this country. We are watching a microcosm, a very brief blip in a big long trajectory. And I think if we zoom out long enough, we're going to see, zoom out far enough, right, we'll see patterns now. Now, I think that freedom, if you look through the trajectory of history, it wins. These efforts to clamp down on speech, the idea that the government can solve everybody's problem and provide endless resources and endless value to everybody who wants it, I think is a fiction. And just like all fictions and fairy tales, those stories come to an end, and everybody has to wake up and come back to reality. And so the people who I think voted for it this way, the people who vote for bigger government and more government solutions, are giving up a part of their spirit, a part of their soul, to have some other bureaucrat set the tone and the direction of their lives. And that's imprisoning. There's only so much of that you can give up. There will always be bureaucrats and dictators and little tyrants who say, "Oh, we'll keep you safe. We can keep you safe. We'll handle it for you. No, we know what's better for you. Oh, we'll provide national security for the global security. Oh, we'll set the policy. We know how to manage the US dollar. We've got it all covered. Just trust us." The more and more people that go into the voting booths and give that over to them, the more of themselves they're giving up, and there is only so much balance on that card, swiping it a lot, before they recognize they're not getting anything for this. And the capacity of the federal government is not sustainable. So all of this will become true soon enough, and freedom will ultimately prevail. But it's not without effort. It's not without accepting some internal work that needs to be done and reflect and grow. It's certainly what I'm doing, asking myself where a big part of this gap was between expectations and what we're seeing from our fellow countrymen. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I think that it's important to check our beliefs, make sure that we're course correcting, and have our eyes on reality. Because if this is the direction the country wants to go, we need to know about that, so that we can begin becoming more anti-fragile and taking control of our lives, because we ultimately have that control as much as we do outside of our higher powers. But the point is, it's not the government. Federal government is the biggest problem in our lives. Eventually that will become more evident to our brothers and sisters, but today it's not. So the only thing we can do is make sure that our side of the street is clean, that we have some motivation and energy to continue to remain anti-fragile and continue to push forward with our work. And so that's what is floating on my mind today, my friends. Very interesting week ahead as the dust continues to settle, and there will be a lot of stories to get to, but I hope you are making it a beautiful day and a beautiful week. And wherever it is you are, you're getting outside, getting some fresh air and sunshine. Although my understanding is it's snowing in other parts of the country and the world. So if you're not getting any sunshine here, go up to your screen. Here, there you go. Hold the phone, hold your screen close, get that vitamin D in. Coming at you from downtown Phoenix. I hope you're making it a great day, my friends, and I will see you tonight. Bye-bye.